On the outskirts of Hollow Pines, a quiet town smothered by endless stretches of forest, there lay an old road the locals rarely spoke of. It had no name on any map, yet the cracked pavement wound through the trees like a scar, fading into the dark woods where sunlight rarely touched. The town children dared one another to ride their bikes down it, though few ever went far, claiming that the silence beyond the first bend was so complete it pressed on their chests like a weight. No one lived along the road anymore. Decades ago, there had been cabins and small farms, but all had been abandoned, left to rot beneath vines and moss. The adults in Hollow Pines said the soil there had soured, crops failed, and livestock disappeared into the forest at night. But the children whispered darker reasons. Strange lights drifting between the trees, faces glimpsed in broken windows, voices calling from behind boarded doors. It was along this forsaken road that a group of 5 travelers came late one autumn evening. Their car rattled over the uneven asphalt, headlights cutting through the gathering fog. They had been driving for hours, a storm pushing them off the highway onto the narrow, winding route through the woods. Exhaustion made their voices sharp, but none dared suggest stopping in the forest. The group was bound by old ties, friends once close in youth, now reunited after years apart. Yet under the thin veil of laughter and small talk, tension rippled between them. Memories carried weight, and not all were pleasant. As the road grew darker, each seemed to feel the old grudges stirring like restless ghosts. Then the headlights caught something ahead. A figure. It stood in the center of the road, motionless, its shape blurred by mist. The driver slammed the brakes, the tires skidding across cracked pavement. The car came to a shuddering halt just yards from the figure. But when they leaned forward, squinting into the beams of light, there was nothing. The road was empty, the forest around them hushed, as though listening. A branch snapped in the trees, then another. The sound circled them, slow and deliberate. No one spoke. The air was damp with the smell of wet earth, the kind that seeped deep into the lungs. Finally, someone broke the silence with a shaky laugh, insisting it was a deer. Another agreed too quickly, eager to move on. The car rolled forward, tires crunching gravel, headlights sweeping the road. But the figure returned, closer this time, just beyond the reach of light, at the curve of the road. Waiting, the figure did not move. It stood with a stillness unnatural even for the dead of night, its outline faintly human but distorted by the fog. The driver swore under his breath, hands trembling on the wheel, as if pressing harder might anchor him to reality. The others shifted uneasily, their voices rising with nervous theories. Perhaps it was a hiker lost in the woods, or someone stranded in the storm. But none of them believed it. The forest pressed in, suffocating in its silence. Leaves barely rustled despite the wind, and the fog thickened with each breath they took. Against their better judgment, one of the passengers rolled down a window to call out. His voice cracked as it carried into the trees, swallowed too quickly, as though the forest itself were hungry. No reply came. The figure tilted its head. Gasps erupted inside the car. The driver cursed and floored the accelerator. The tires shrieked, throwing stones behind them as they sped around the curve. Branches whipped against the car's sides like clawing hands. Hearts thundered, but no one dared to look back. Yet even as they pushed forward, the feeling remained, an unshakable certainty that they were not alone. Shadows moved between the trees, keeping pace with the car, vanishing whenever headlights neared. The air grew colder, their breath misting in the cabin. Then the road ended. Without warning, the cracked pavement dissolved into gravel, then into dirt. The headlights revealed a collapsed bridge ahead, its wooden beams rotted and broken, dropping into a river that foamed black under the storm. The driver slammed the brakes again, the car lurching violently as it skidded to a stop just feet from the edge. Screams filled the car, then silence, broken only by the ragged breathing of those inside. Behind them, the figure stood in the center of the road. It had followed. This time, there was no mist or shadow to blur it. The figure was clear, a man tall and gaunt, his clothing torn and stained with mud, his face pale and hollow-eyed. But his mouth stretched into something too wide, too wrong, as if it had been carved into his skin. The group froze. The man did not move closer, yet his presence pressed against them, heavy and unbearable. One of them whispered they should turn around, but even as the words left their lips, the man took a step forward. The forest groaned, and the headlights flickered. Panic clawed at the group as the headlights dimmed, the car trembling as though the machine itself sensed the presence on the road. The gaunt man stood unblinking, his grotesque smile fixed, while the storm rumbled low above the forest canopy. The driver tried the ignition, desperate to reverse, but the car coughed and sputtered, refusing to move. The air grew colder still, every breath rising in plumes inside the cabin. One of them, voice quivering, insisted they leave the car and run into the woods. Better the unknown trees than that thing on the road. Another shouted back that the forest was no safer, that everyone in town knew to stay away from hollow pines after dark. The man took another step. His joints bent oddly, too sharp, as though his bones had been broken and reset wrong. The sound of his footfall carried unnaturally clear across the wet earth. The passenger door opened before anyone could protest. One of them bolted into the tree line, their screams swallowed quickly by the woods. The others shouted after them, but their words were smothered by the storm. The man stopped, his head twisting sharply toward the fleeing figure. His grin widened further, impossibly so, splitting his cheeks like paper. The trees seemed to lean toward him, their branches clawing at the dark. Then, without a sound, he stepped into the forest and vanished. Silence returned. Those left in the car stared at the black line of trees, the storm battering the windshield. Then, faintly, a scream erupted in the distance. It rose high and shrill, cut off mid-breath, and the woods fell silent once more. No one dared to move. The group huddled in the stalled car, each second stretching into eternity. Lightning flashed, illuminating the forest in stark white. For an instant, shapes stood between the trees, human-like, unmoving, watching. When darkness returned, so did the suffocating silence. The driver slammed the ignition again, and this time the engine roared to life, though weak and sputtering. Without speaking, he reversed the car, steering with shaking hands, the ruined bridge looming in the mirrors like an open maw. The headlights swept the road, catching glimpses of damp bark and gnarled roots. Then, as they rounded the curve, the beams illuminated something standing in the middle of the road. Not the gaunt man, someone else. It was their friend, or at least it looked like their friend. Clothes soaked, skin pale, eyes wide and empty. They stood motionless, lips parted as though to speak. But no sound came. Gasps broke out in the car, and one of them cried out their name, desperate with hope. The figure twitched, their head jerking slightly, and then a voice emerged, hoarse, broken, repeating a single word again and again. "Stay!" The car swerved around them, tires spraying mud. No one looked back, though all felt the weight of unseen eyes burning against their skin. The forest seemed alive, shifting and breathing, every branch and shadow stretching closer. Finally, after what felt like hours, the road widened into a clearing. There, looming from the fog, stood a house. Its frame sagged with rot, windows dark and hollow, yet light flickered faintly within. Smoke curled from a chimney that should not have stood. Relief washed over them. Any shelter seemed safer than the road. They pulled into the overgrown yard, the engine groaning as though protesting. The headlights illuminated the sagging porch, the peeling paint, the door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. But the light inside remained steady, and from within came the faint sound of laughter. The travelers hesitated only a moment before rushing toward the house. Rain lashed at their backs, the forest looming like a wall behind them. The porch creaked under their weight, the wood soft with rot, but the laughter from within drew them closer like a flame. The door opened with a groan. Inside, the air was dry, though heavy with the scent of mildew and smoke. A single lantern flickered on a table in the center of the room, casting warped shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Dust coated every surface, disturbed only by the footprints now trailing inside. The laughter had stopped. They called out, voices shaking, but the house gave no reply. The silence pressed in again, broken only by the wind rattling loose shingles above. Yet as they stepped further inside, the lantern flame flared higher, as though feeding on their presence. One of them touched the table. The wood was warm. Then, from upstairs, came the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Each creak of the floorboards above sent tremors through the group. No one spoke. They stood frozen, eyes locked on the staircase that rose into the darkness. The footsteps stopped, replaced by the faint drag of something heavy being pulled across the floor. The lantern flickered again. Shadows writhed along the walls, bending unnaturally, reaching toward the travelers. The air thickened, damp and suffocating, as if the house itself were breathing. Then a voice drifted down the stairs. Not laughter, not words, just a low, wet whisper, calling each of their names. The sound of their names whispered through the rotting halls, each syllable stretched and broken as if spoken through water. The group backed away from the staircase, their breaths shallow and ragged. None dared to answer. The lantern sputtered, its flame shrinking, shadows clawing across the walls. Someone reached to steady it, but their hand recoiled instantly. The glass was blistering hot. The whispers grew louder, multiplying, weaving over each other in a chorus that filled every corner of the house. Some voices sounded familiar, like friends long lost. Others were stranger, raw and hollow, carrying the tone of suffering. Then silence. The lantern died, plunging the house into black. Panic surged, and they fumbled in the dark, grasping for one another. A phone's flashlight clicked on, its pale beam cutting through the suffocating gloom. For an instant, the group exhaled in shaky relief until the light touched the walls. Names were carved into the plaster, dozens of them, hundreds, each etched deep, gouged by hands that must have bled. Some names were old, faded into dust. Others were fresh, carved as if only hours ago. Among them were their own names. The beam shook wildly as they backed toward the door. But before they reached it, a loud crash thundered from upstairs. The dragging sound returned, faster this time, heavy, violent. Something was coming down the stairs. The flashlight trembled in their grip as they turned it toward the staircase. The beam quivered over the warped wood, catching glimpses of peeling paint and claw marks dug deep into the banister. The sound grew louder. A thud, a scrape, another thud, the rhythm of something dragging itself step by step. They stumbled back toward the door, but the knob would not turn. It rattled uselessly in their hands, locked from within. A cry of frustration broke out as one of them kicked the door, the wood groaning but refusing to give. The scraping grew closer. At last, the light caught it. A hand, long, pale fingers curling over the banister, nails broken and caked with dirt. The rest of the body lurched into view, gaunt and twisted, clothes hanging in tatters, eyes sunk deep in a face that no longer seemed human. Its limbs bent wrong, its movements jerking as though forced by unseen strings. But worse than its body was its face. The same stretched smile, the same hollow gaze, the same wrongness that had followed them on the road. It dragged itself down another step, its head jerking to the side with a sickening crack. The whispers returned, rising into a frantic chant, echoing from the walls themselves. The names carved into the plaster seemed to vibrate, the grooves darkening as if filled with fresh blood. One of them screamed and threw a chair at the creature. The wood splintered across its body, but it did not flinch. Instead, it raised its head and opened its mouth wider, wider than bone should allow, until the jaw split with a tearing sound. And then it screamed. The walls shook. The lantern burst back to life in a violent flare. The door swung open on its own. The group didn't hesitate. They ran into the storm. Rain lashed at them as they stumbled into the yard, mud sucking at their shoes. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the forest beyond the clearing. The car still sat where they had left it, headlights dim, But the moment they reached for the doors, the engine sputtered and died. Behind them, the house loomed. The lantern light burned in every window now, each pane glowing with an unnatural fire. Shadows writhed within, clawing at the glass as though desperate to escape. The whispers leaked from the walls, growing louder, chasing them into the storm. They fled toward the tree-line, forcing their way into the thick undergrowth. Branches tore at their clothes, rain blinded their eyes, and the forest floor turned to muck beneath their feet. The storm swallowed every sound but their own gasping breaths. But something followed. They heard it in the snapping of branches just behind them, in the steady crunch of footsteps that never faltered no matter how fast they ran. Each time lightning lit the forest, they saw it closer, just behind, its pale face glowing through the trees, its grin cutting through the storm. The forest twisted, paths splitting and circling back, landmarks repeating where they shouldn't. No matter which way they turned, the road refused to appear. At last, breathless and soaked to the bone, they stumbled into another clearing. In its center stood an old well, stone cracked and covered in moss. Its wooden cover lay shattered on the ground, rain pooling in the black mouth that yawned wide. The footsteps stopped. Silence fell once more. They turned slowly, the beam of the phone light cutting through sheets of rain. The forest around them stood still, empty. Then, from the well came the sound of breathing. The breathing from the well was slow and deliberate, echoing against the stone walls as though something vast lurked far below. Each inhale rasped wet and heavy. Each exhale rattled like the death rattle of some unseen giant. The group froze, their soaked clothes clinging to their trembling bodies. The phone light shook as it swept across the mossy stone ring, illuminating the dark maw. Rain hissed as it poured into the depths, vanishing into blackness without a sound of water below. One of them whispered that they should keep moving, that the well was nothing but a trick of the storm. But even as the words left their lips, the breathing grew louder, closer, as if the thing below had pressed its face against the stone walls, listening. Then, faintly, something moved inside. A hand. Pale, thin fingers gripped the edge of the well. Mud-streaked nails dug into the stone, cracking it under unnatural strength. Another hand followed, then the top of a head, slick with rain and hair plastered across a face. It was the man, the same grin, the same hollow eyes, but this time his movements were smoother, deliberate. He pulled himself upward as though climbing from a grave. The group backed away, stumbling over roots and rocks, their cries lost to the storm. One of them slipped, crashing into the mud, and the phone flew from their hand, the light snapping out. Darkness consumed them. The breathing was right behind them now. In blind panic, they scrambled from the clearing, leaving the well behind. Branches tore at their arms and faces, mud sucked at their feet, but none dared slow. The storm raged louder, every crash of thunder masking the sound of pursuit. But the pursuit was there. They felt it in the air, heavy and cold, pressing against their spines. They glimpsed it when lightning split the sky, shadows darting between trees, wrong shapes that seemed to stretch too tall, too thin. Sometimes they swore they saw themselves running just ahead, twisted reflections mimicking their movements with grotesque delay. The forest was no longer a forest. Paths doubled back, trees bent into arches that shouldn't exist. The ground sloped where it had been flat. The woods were folding around them, reshaping into a labyrinth that would not let them leave. Finally, through the rain, they saw light. A cabin stood in the distance, its windows glowing faintly, smoke curling from its chimney. Relief surged, though it was sharp and desperate, an instinct clawing for hope. They stumbled toward it, half dragging one another, mud weighing them down. But as they neared, they realized it wasn't a cabin. It was the same house, the same sagging roof, the same crooked door, the same lantern flickering in the window. Somehow, impossibly, they had circled back. The door creaked open. Inside, shadows writhed, whispering their names. Terror froze them at the tree line. The house loomed larger now, its windows burning brighter, the lantern flames within twisting higher, hungrier. The laughter returned, low at first, then swelling until it shook the air. One of them broke first, screaming they would rather face the storm than step inside again. They turned to run, but the path behind had vanished. The forest pressed closer, trees leaning inward, their trunks forming a wall of twisted bark. The house was the only way forward. The door yawned wide, its hinges shrieking as though in mockery. The air pouring out was warm, damp, and thick with rot. Yet their bodies moved against their will, step by step, pulled by some force deeper than fear. As they crossed the threshold, the storm cut off. The silence within was worse than the rain, so heavy it rang in their ears. The lantern still burned on the table, but its light was dim now, faint as though suffocated. The staircase loomed again, shadows dripping from the top like oil. The dragging sound resumed, slower, patient, and then they saw it. On the table beside the lantern lay a book. Its cover was leather, cracked and slick with age. Names filled its pages, written in jagged, bleeding ink. The same names carved into the walls. The same names whispered in the dark. The same names as theirs. The book's pages fluttered as though caught in an unseen wind, though the air in the house was heavy and still. The ink shimmered wet in the lantern glow, as if freshly written. Their names bled through the parchment, each letter trembling like a wound that had never healed. One of them, hands shaking, reached for the book. The others tried to stop them, but it was too late. Fingers brushed the cracked leather, and the lantern extinguished. Darkness swallowed the room whole. The air shifted, colder, pressing in from every direction. The book thudded shut on its own. Whispers surged, louder than ever, hissing each of their names over and over in overlapping, frantic voices. The sound drilled into their skulls until it felt as though their very bones vibrated. Then the lantern flared back to life. The book was gone. In its place lay 5 small objects, each one personal. A ring, a photograph, pocket knife, a bracelet, keychain. Belongings they recognized as their own, though none remembered leaving them there. Their blood ran cold. The items were worn, dirt-streaked, as though they had been buried long ago. Upstairs, the dragging sound quickened. The group scattered, fear splintering them apart. Some rushed for the door, others darted into shadowed hallways. The house groaned with every step, boards bending as if the walls themselves reached for them. The dragging sound thundered above, now joined by a second, then a third. More than one thing was on the stairs. One of them, breath ragged, flashlight beam trembling, found themselves in the kitchen. The counters were covered in dust, the sink filled with stagnant water. Cobwebs clung to the corners. Yet the table in the center was set neatly, plates arranged, utensils gleaming in the lantern's glow that somehow reached here. Each plate bore a name scratched into the porcelain. Their names. Footsteps echoed behind them. They spun, but the doorway was empty. Only shadows. Then, slowly, the utensils began to move. Forks rattled. Knives scraped across the plates with an ear-piercing screech. The sound built into a crescendo until the plates cracked, splintering down the center, shards scattering across the floor. From beneath the broken porcelain rose pale fingers. Hands clawed upward, gripping the table edge. Meanwhile, in the hallway, another of the group stumbled into a mirror. Their reflection stared back, but it was wrong. Its mouth stretched wider, its eyes black pits. It reached out in perfect sync, but when they stepped back, the reflection remained. Then it leaned forward, pressing its hands against the glass. Cracks split the mirror, and the reflection began to climb through. Screams tore through the house. Each room had become its own nightmare, its own trap. The travelers fought their way back toward one another, crashing through doors, stumbling into halls warped by shadow. The house seemed endless, its corridors repeating, stairs leading nowhere. At last, they regrouped in the main room, hearts pounding, faces pale. The dragging had stopped. Silence weighed heavy, thicker than before. Then, faintly, came the sound of footsteps. Not from above this time, but from below. The floorboards vibrated as if something massive moved beneath them. The sound of nails scraping would echo through the beams. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. One of them whispered that there was a basement. As if in response, a hatch groaned open in the center of the floor. Rusted hinges screamed as the wood yawned wide, revealing a staircase spiraling into the dark. A stench of earth and decay rolled upward, suffocating. From the pit came a chorus of voices. Not whispers, not screams. Laughter. The hatch yawned wide, the laughter rising from the depths like smoke from a smoldering fire. Each note was warped, layered, as though dozens of throats laughed together, some high and shrill, others low and guttural. The sound curdled the air, thick with rot and damp earth. No one wanted to move, but the pull of the basement was undeniable. It drew them like a tide, irresistible, even as terror rooted their feet. Their bodies trembled with resistance, yet their steps carried them forward, closer to the open maw in the floor. The lantern flickered violently, shadows stretching across the walls. Then, without warning, it burst, shards of glass scattering, flame extinguished. Darkness swallowed them whole. A phone light clicked on. Its trembling beam cut across the hatch, illuminating the first few steps of the staircase. The wood was slick with something dark and wet, dripping slowly into the black below. The laughter hushed, replaced by the sound of breathing. Many lungs inhaling together. One of them whispered they had to close it to trap whatever lay beneath. They grabbed the hatch and pulled, but it would not budge. The wood seemed fused to the floor, as though the house itself demanded it remain open. Then, from the depths, a voice rose above the breathing, spoke their names again. Each syllable was clearer now, stronger, spoken in perfect imitation of their own voices. The house groaned, and something began to climb the stairs. A pale hand emerged first, fingers long and skeletal, nails clicking against the wet wood. Then another. They gripped the stairs and hauled upward, revealing faces. But the faces were theirs. Each figure that rose from the pit wore the likeness of one of the travelers. Hollow-eyed, grinning wide, their movements jerking but purposeful. Mud dripped from their hair, their mouths stretched too far, too thin. The real travelers stumbled back, choking on cries of horror as their own reflections crawled into the room, one by one. Each double twitched and clicked their jaws, laughter spilling from their throats in distorted echoes. One of them screamed and swung a chair, splintering it across their doppelganger's back. The creature staggered but did not fall. Instead, it lunged, jaw opening wide enough to tear at the air, teeth slick and black. The group scattered, panic tearing them apart once again. Shadows writhed along the walls, stretching tall and thin, twisting like the forest outside. The house seemed to pulse with the sound of laughter, the walls breathing in unison with the creatures. One of the doubles reached for the lantern's remnants on the table, lifting the shattered glass. With jerking motions, it dragged the shard down its face, splitting its own grin wider, bloodless yet dripping black. The others followed, carving their mouths open until each grin was grotesque, a perfect imitation of the gaunt man who had first appeared on the road. The house shook violently, dust pouring from the rafters. The laughter rose into a deafening chorus, vibrating through the floorboards until it felt like the entire structure might collapse. Desperate, the travelers pushed for the door. This time it opened without resistance, flinging outward into the storm. They poured into the yard, rain pelting their skin, mud sucking at their feet. Behind them, the house burned with light, every window glowing white-hot, shadows writhing inside like a nest of serpents. But the doubles followed. They spilled from the doorway, crawling on hands and feet, their grins shining in the lightning. Their laughter echoed across the clearing, too loud to belong to so few mouths. They moved fast, faster than the storm itself, spreading out to encircle the group. The forest pressed in tight, paths vanishing. The road was gone. The world was reduced to mud, trees, storm, and the house that would not die. One of them fell to their knees, screaming that it was hopeless, that the town had been right. Hollow Pines was cursed, and no one ever left. The others dragged them up, their voices breaking, demanding they keep moving. And then the forest opened again. Before them stood the well. Its mouth yawned wider now, stones cracked, roots tearing up from the earth around it. The storm seemed to funnel into its depths, rain vanishing into blackness. From below came that same breathing, louder than before. The doubles stopped chasing. They stood still at the tree-line, grinning, waiting. The rail travelers turned slowly, realizing too late. Something else was climbing from the well. The well groaned as its stones cracked and shifted. From the depths, a massive hand emerged, each finger long as branches, nails jagged and black. It gripped the rim, splintering stone as if it were paper. The ground trembled beneath their feet, the storm silenced by the sound of something colossal pulling itself upward. Another hand rose, then the crown of a head, skull elongated, skin stretched tight and gray. Its hollow eyes glowed faintly, reflecting lightning, and its grin, vast and jagged, split its entire face. The travelers staggered back, their voices choked in their throats. Behind them, the doubles stood in rigid silence, watching, waiting, their own mouths twitching in mimicry of the thing emerging from the well. The creature's body rose higher, dragging itself into the clearing. Its chest was a cavern, ribs exposed like twisted beams, shadows writhing within as if alive. Each step shook the ground, mud rippling like water. The forest leaned inward, trees bowing as though in reverence. One of the travelers collapsed, clutching their ears. The thing was not just rising, it was speaking. Its voice was beneath the earth, in the rain, in the marrow of their bones. It whispered the same names carved into the house, the same names written in the book. Their names. The storm bent around it, and with one final heave, the creature stood fully above ground, towering, smiling, waiting. The group turned and ran, screaming into the forest. Their legs slipped in the mud, branches tore at their faces, but terror gave them strength. Behind them, the sound of the giant thing's laughter rolled like thunder, shaking leaves from trees. The doubles followed in silence, their bare feet slapping the wet ground, their movements unervingly smooth. No matter how fast the travelers ran, the copies stayed close, slipping between trees, always at the edge of vision. Lightning cracked overhead, revealing paths that shouldn't exist. Trails splitting and looping impossible bends that led them back to the clearing. Each attempt to escape brought them closer again to the well. The creature did not need to pursue. It stood at the center, watching, its grin widening with every circle they made. The forest itself seemed to conspire, herding them back toward its feet. At last, in desperation, one of them broke away, sprinting into a gap in the trees that seemed new, untouched. The others followed, too panicked to think. The path sloped downward, the earth soft and crumbling beneath their feet. And then they saw it, through the storm, a flicker of headlights. The road, their car. It sat crooked at the edge of the trees, doors still open, headlights dim but alive. Relief surged, wild and overwhelming. They pushed harder, half crying, half laughing. But as they neared, they saw the truth. It wasn't their car. It was older, rusted, its frame half swallowed by roots. And inside, through the cracked windshield, lay skeletons slumped in the seats. Horror struck like ice water. The travelers froze at the edge of the clearing, rain stinging their faces. The skeletons sat as if waiting, hands on the wheel, heads bowed, mouths stretched into the same impossible grins. The rusted license plate glinted in the lightning. It bore their own numbers. The car was theirs, or it would be. The forest fell utterly silent. Even the storm seemed to hold its breath. The doubles stood at the tree line, their wide grins fixed, their hollow eyes unblinking. The massive creature loomed in the distance, still by the well, its grin reflected in every shadow. The travelers began to understand. This was not escape. This was memory. Others had walked this road before, others who had screamed and fled and fought. Their names had filled the book. Their reflections had walked the woods, and now it was their turn to join them. The skeletons in the car were not strangers. They were themselves, and as the realization sank in, the headlights flickered once more, and the skeletons inside began to laugh. The laughter from the car was brittle, rattling through the cracked ribs of the skeletons, echoing hollowly inside the rusted frame. The travelers stumbled backward, their screams lost in the storm, their eyes wide as the bones began to move. Fingers twitched, jaws creaked open, one skull turned, empty sockets fixing on them with grotesque attention. The laughter swelled, overlapping with their doubles at the tree line, until the clearing pulsed with sound. The car doors burst open. The skeletons crawled out, bones clacking, their movements wrong, like puppets dragged by strings too tight. Mud splattered as they staggered upright, mouths frozen in eternal grins. The travelers ran again, no longer caring which way. Trees whipped by, roots caught their ankles, but they pressed forward, driven by instinct more than hope. Behind them, the chorus of laughter followed, chasing through the storm, through the woods, through the very air. The ground sloped steeply, and suddenly they were tumbling down, sliding through muck and leaves. They landed hard at the bottom of a ravine, the earth soft and wet beneath them. For a moment, they lay gasping, rain pounding their faces. When they lifted their heads, they saw stone walls rising around them. The ravine was no ravine. It was a grave. The pit stretched wide, its edges jagged, its bottom littered with bones. Rusted chains jutted from the earth, broken and tangled. Wooden crosses lay splintered in the mud, names etched faintly into them, names already too familiar. The group scrambled to their feet, panic clawing at their throats. They clawed at the mud walls, desperate to climb, but the earth crumbled beneath their fingers, pulling them deeper each time. The rain poured harder, filling the pit, turning the ground into sucking mire. A shadow passed over them. They looked up and froze. The creature from the well loomed above the grave, its hollow eyes fixed downward, its grin splitting wider with every heartbeat. The doubles stood at the rim, their silhouettes sharp against the storm. Behind them, the skeletons gathered, clattering and twitching. The pit became a stage, and they were the performance. The mud clutched at their legs, pulling them deeper. Each attempt to climb only dragged them further down. The laughter rose again, deafening now, vibrating through their bones, shaking the pit walls until more dirt caved in. Then, slowly, the creature bent forward. Its massive head descended into the grave, its grin stretching across the sky. And in their own voices, perfectly mimicked, it whispered, "You were always here." The rain turned heavier still, sheets of water pouring into the pit. The mud rose past their knees, thick and suffocating. Each step became harder, every movement pulling them down deeper. Panic turned to raw despair as they clawed at one another, desperate to stay above the mire. Above, their doubles began to chant, their names over and over in perfect unison. The sound grew louder, drowning out the storm, drowning out thought itself. The skeletons rattled with laughter, shaking until bones snapped and fell loose, only to reassemble and rise again. The creature's face hovered just above the pit, its hollow eyes reflecting nothing, its grin wide enough to split the sky. One by one, the travelers felt the mud swallow them higher, waist, chest, shoulders. The weight pressed down, cold and unyielding. They screamed, but the storm carried no sound. Then the first of them disappeared, pulled under, their hand flailing once before vanishing into the muck. Another followed, their cries cut off mid-breath. The mud tasted of rot, of old earth, of something alive beneath. The last of them, sinking fast, lifted their head one final time. The doubles stared back, their grins infinite, their black eyes reflecting only void. The skeletons clattered, jaws wide, and the creature whispered again, "You belong." The mud closed over their face. The world went dark. The storm finally broke, leaving the forest drenched and silent. The road lay empty, cracked asphalt winding through the trees, but no headlights pierced the fog. No footsteps echoed in the mud. Only the whisper of wind through leaves marked that anything had passed this way. The house stood at the edge of the clearing, crooked and silent. Its windows were dark now. No lantern flickered. No laughter echoed. The well sat open in the yard, black and gaping, stones slick with rain. But it had no breathing, no sound, only the reflection of storm clouds on the water pooled within. In the pit below, mud and rainwater had settled. Nothing moved. The forest around the clearing seemed normal again, though the trees still leaned subtly inward, branches like fingers stretching out, waiting. The road remained deserted. Yet, far in the distance, a soft, almost imperceptible sound threaded through the trees. A faint scratching, a whisper of laughter, the sound of footsteps that were not quite human. It was quiet, almost peaceful, almost somewhere, deep beneath the earth, in the house that no longer seemed alive, the book of names lay open. Its pages were empty, waiting, and the wind carried a single word, soft and curling around the branches. Come. Years later, travelers passing through hollow pines sometimes spoke of a road that shouldn't exist. Some said it twisted back on itself no matter how far one drove. Others swore they saw a house at the edge of the trees, its windows glowing, shadows shifting inside. No one stayed long. Those who tried to explore vanished, leaving only scattered belongings in the mud. A shoe here, a photograph there, a bracelet torn and half buried in the earth. Local children whispered stories of the laughing dead, of faces grinning through broken windows, of names scratched into walls that no one else could see. The old road remained, cracked and quiet. The forest closed in around it, swallowing sounds, warping paths. Travelers who drove it at night felt eyes watching from between the trees, saw flashes of pale faces, heard laughter on the wind. And if you stopped too long, if your headlights caught a figure standing in the road, still unblinking, smiling, you might hear your own name whispered back to you, because the road remembered, and the house never forgot. The forest waits, the well waits, the laughter waits, and one day it will call your name. No map shows the path anymore. Those who escape tell conflicting stories. Some say the road loops endlessly, returning you to the same spot. Others claim you vanish into the woods entirely, only glimpsed years later as a pale figure standing silently on the cracked asphalt. All who enter hollow pines at night carry the risk of being remembered. The forest watches, the house waits, and beneath it all, the well sighs and breathes, ready to rise again. Sometimes, in the distance, travelers swear they see headlights. But closer inspection reveals no car, only shadows of movement that mimic life. And if you listen closely, beneath the rustle of leaves and the wind in the trees, you can hear it. A soft, wet whisper, calling your name. And if you answer, you never leave. The names of those who vanished on the old road became legends whispered in hollow pines. Parents warn children never to stray near the forest after dark. Hunters refused to track deer beyond the first bends. Even the most hardened travelers who had driven through during the day swore the shadows moved differently there, as if the trees leaned toward them with intent. Those who disappeared were never truly gone. Some glimpsed figures in the fog, silhouettes with stretched grins and hollow eyes that vanished when approached. Others swore they heard their own names whispered while walking home from town, or saw reflections in mirrors that didn't belong to them. The old road seemed to breathe with memory. Its cracked asphalt wound through the forest in impossible ways. Travelers who entered at night often ended up circling, passing the same rotten signposts and overgrown driveways, until exhaustion left them frozen on the roadside, vulnerable. And the house remained. Crooked, silent, yet alive in ways no one could explain. Windows occasionally flickered with lantern light, shadows twisted unnaturally inside. Sometimes, late at night, townsfolk swore the laughter carried from the edge of the forest, soft, patient, waiting for anyone foolish enough to respond. The forest held secrets no map could show. The well waited, and beneath the earth, mud and rot preserved those who had once fled. They were remembered, but in a form that was no longer human. Inside the house, the floors creaked, boards bending under weight no one could see. Dust settled slowly, yet shadows moved as though the air itself had life. Whispers echoed through the empty halls, rising from the cracks in the walls, dripping from the ceiling, curling along the staircases. The book of names lay in the main room, waiting. Its pages were still blank, but the paper smelled of wet earth and decay. Invisible hands turned the pages with care, as if anticipating the next entry. Outside, the forest shifted. Trees leaned into the road, roots twisting into impossible shapes. The well exhaled faint mist, a low sigh that drifted across the clearing, carrying a wet, hollow whisper. Those who walked near it at night sometimes felt the ground tug at their feet, soft and alive beneath the mud. The doubles, standing silently at the edge of the trees, grinned. Pale, hollow, and perfectly still, they watched any who dared approach. They waited for the moment a traveler would stumble, for the instant fear broke their resolve. The house had no doors or windows for the living. It only accepted those who walked willingly into its embrace. And it had patience, endless patience. The well, black and deep, seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Rainwater collected in its depths, reflecting no sky, no clouds, only infinite darkness. Occasionally, travelers reported hearing faint splashes, whispers, or laughter echoing from its depths. Those who dared peer in too long felt a pull, subtle at first, then irresistible. Hands gripped stone, even when no one was there. The well remembered every person who had ever fallen in, every scream that had dissolved into mud and rot, and it waited, patient, for the next. Sometimes, the wind carried a voice upward from the well, low and wet, calling the names of travelers who had come too close. They would stop mid-step, frozen, unsure if it was memory, imagination, or the forest reaching for them. The laughter would follow soon after, soft at first, then swelling into a chorus, echoing from every tree, every shadow, every hollow corner. And if anyone answered, they joined the chorus forever. The road remained, the house remained, the well remained. All else was illusion. All paths led back to them. Travelers who survived the first night on the old road rarely returned unchanged. They spoke of endless loops, paths that bent impossibly, and shadows that followed without sound. Even in daylight, the forest seemed to whisper their fears back at them. Birds would stop singing, and the wind would carry faint, half-formed laughter. The house remained at the edge of the clearing, ever watchful. Windows flickered with the faint glow of lanterns inside, though no one entered. The well exhaled its fog, mist curling toward the trees like tendrils searching for prey. Those who lingered too long felt the earth itself breathe beneath their feet. The doubles were always near, not attacking immediately but circling, waiting for hesitation, watching for fear. Those who froze or faltered were swiftly overtaken, pulled into the mud, dragged under, or simply vanished into the shadows. And the laughter always returned, growing louder with every lost soul, rising through the trees, spilling into the night. Mirrors and puddles became gateways. Travelers glimpsed reflections that were wrong, not quite themselves. Eyes hollow or black, mouths stretched impossibly wide, shadows moving independently of the body. Sometimes the reflection whispered their secrets, their fears, or even called their names. Some tried to flee, running blindly through the forest. Others attempted to hide, but the house and its minions always found them. Branches would twist to block escape, roots would coil around legs. Shadows would fill the gaps between trees, closing in with quiet persistence. The well, ever patient, waited below. Its depths seemed to shift, stretching further than the eye could see. The water reflected not the storm above but faces. Faces of travelers long gone, grinning, calling, beckoning. And always, the forest pressed in tighter, until the line between reality and nightmare dissolved completely. The few who reached the edge of the clearing on the road sometimes saw faint light, distant, warm, almost inviting. They ran toward it desperately, thinking it was safety, only to find the glow emanated from the house itself, lanterns flickering in windows that should have been empty. The doubles stood in the tree lean, watching with unmoving faces. The skeletons crouched, waiting, their grins perfect. And the well exhaled softly, mist curling upward to meet the travelers' faces. No doors remained open for the living. The path ahead always curved back to the house, the well, the laughter. Fear became instinct, survival became illusion. The storm passed, yet the terror endured, bound to the old road, the forest, the house, the well. The first light of dawn never reached the travelers here. Only shadows, only whispers, only the memory of their own names, echoing endlessly through hollow pines. Night fell quickly in hollow pines, as if the forest swallowed the sun itself. The trees loomed higher, twisting inward, blotting out the stars. Travelers who thought they were lost in the dark soon realized the night had no end here. Even the storm clouds vanished, leaving a suffocating blackness. The house sat at the clearing's edge, its windows glowing faintly. Shadows moved inside, stretching long arms toward the forest. The well exhaled mist that carried faint whispers, calling travelers' names, taunting them with familiarity. The doubles emerged silently from the tree lean, surrounding anyone foolish enough to pause. Their hollow eyes glimmered with anticipation, and their grins stretched impossibly wide. Behind them, the skeletons shuffled forward, joints creaking like old doors. The travelers stumbled, desperate to escape, only to find the road curving back upon itself, loops forming in impossible geometries. No matter which way they ran, the path always led to the clearing, to the house, to the well. And above it all, laughter echoed, soft at first, then rising, a chorus of horror that filled the night sky. Branches bent like hands, snagging hair and clothes, pulling travelers back toward the clearing. Roots erupted from the mud like serpents, wrapping around ankles and dragging them down. Every tree seemed to lean inward, walls of wood that whispered in voices too faint to identify. The well lay in the center, its black mouth exhaling a chilling mist. Every inhalation of that mist brought nausea, fear, and visions of those who had vanished before. Twisted faces with wide grins, eyes hollow and endless. Some travelers tried to climb trees, to hide, to fight the forest itself. The doubles followed silently, stepping over mud and roots without sinking, grinning wider with each effort. Skeletons clattered behind them, detached hands grasping for those who faltered. The house's lanterns flickered like a heartbeat, calling out with a rhythm that seemed alive. The walls whispered in languages no one understood, yet every word was their own name. Every phrase echoed their fears. Every corner hid a shadow waiting, and through it all, the storm returned, rain lashing sideways, wind tearing at the trees, thunder rumbling with laughter. One traveler tripped in the mud, arms flailing, shouting for help. The forest responded immediately, branches coiled around them like snakes, roots wrapping tight. The doubles approached silently, lifting grinning faces to their own. The well's mist thickened, curling into the pit and spilling over its edges like a living thing. The first traveler screamed as hands, pale and skeletal, erupted from the mud, dragging them downward. Their body vanished, leaving only the echo of a scream and a wet, hollow laugh. The others froze in terror. They tried to run, but the road had vanished. The trees shifted subtly, funneling them back toward the clearing. The house's windows glowed brighter, lanterns flickering as if excited by the sound of struggle. The doubles and skeletons advanced in silence, watching, waiting, patient. The laughter from the well rose in a crescendo, drowning out all hope, and the forest tightened its grip. The remaining travelers stumbled forward, mud sucking at their boots, rain blinding their eyes. They circled back toward the clearing, unable to resist the pull of the house and the well. Shadows twisted along the forest floor, slipping silently between trees, always just out of reach, always watching. From the well, the breathing grew louder. The massive creature that had once climbed from its depths now shifted beneath the mud, unseen but felt in every vibration of the earth. The mist wrapped around their ankles, rising higher with each step, sticky and cold, smelling of decay. One traveler fell to their knees, gasping, unable to continue. A double stepped forward, its grin impossibly wide, hollow eyes unblinking. The hands reached out. The traveler screamed, but the forest swallowed the sound. Mud rose around them like a living thing, dragging them slowly into the earth. The others ran blindly, but the path twisted, bending back upon itself. Each step brought them closer to the well, closer to the house, closer to the inevitable. Above, the house's lanterns flared, shadows writhing across the broken boards as though alive. The forest seemed to pulse with life, each tree moving subtly, branches scraping like claws. Shadows leapt and stretched, mimicking the travelers' movements, grinning in silent mockery. Every glance revealed new figures, doubles, skeletons, impossible shapes, all converging toward the clearing. The travelers tried to hide, diving into thick undergrowth. Mud and roots slowed them, entangling them in the forest's embrace. The laughter returned, layered, echoing through the trees, through their ears, vibrating in their bones. From the trees above, faces peered out. Not human faces, but twisted, pale masks, mouths stretching in unnatural grins. They watched silently, unblinking. Some disappeared when looked at directly, only to reappear closer, higher, faster. The well exhaled again, fog spilling over the rim, curling around ankles and wrists. It whispered promises of safety, of warmth, of rest. But each word carried the weight of inevitability. And in the distance, the house waited. Desperation fueled their legs. They ran as fast as the mud and roots would allow, splashing through puddles, slipping and sliding. The doubles mirrored every movement, skeletal hands reaching closer with every step. Their grins were wider now, stretching impossibly, filled with the anticipation of capture. The storm raged above, wind tearing branches, lightning illuminating the twisted forest. The travelers glimpsed the house, its windows glowing brighter, shadows moving like writhing figures inside. The well gurgled and breathed, fog spilling outward, pulling at them. One by one, travelers stumbled. Mud pulled at their feet, roots wrapped around their ankles. Screams echoed through the forest, swallowed by rain, only to be answered by laughter from the well and whispers from the trees. No matter how fast they ran, the path curved back, bending toward the clearing, toward the house, toward the inevitable end. And the forest closed in, tighter than ever. The remaining travelers realized the forest had no exit. Every path twisted impossibly, leading them back to the clearing, to the house, to the well. Rain drenched them, yet no river or puddle led anywhere but deeper into the mud, deeper into the waiting. The doubles closed in, moving silently, grinning wider, eyes hollow and fixed. Skeletons shuffled alongside, bones clattering with each step. Shadows stretched from tree trunks, coiling around branches, snaking toward the travelers' feet. The air itself seemed alive, pressing on their chests, pulling at their limbs, whispering their names in the voices of those already gone. They tried to resist, to run faster, to climb, but the forest refused. Every step brought them back toward the clearing. Above, the house's windows flared as if the lanterns inside had become enormous eyes, watching, waiting, assessing. The well exhaled mist, thick and cold, curling over the edges, over the travelers' ankles, pulling ever tighter. And the laughter rose again, not from the trees, not from the skeletons, not from the doubles, but from everywhere all at once. An endless chorus calling their names. The first traveler sank into the mud completely, pulled down with hands that were unseen but powerful. Screams echoed, muffled by earth and rain. The others reached out, but the forest itself seemed to clutch at their limbs, tearing them apart from one another. The well called with a soft, wet sigh, exhaling fog that wrapped higher, filling their mouths with its chill. It whispered promises, safety, warmth, release, but the meaning was clear. None could escape. Every breath drawn was borrowed, every step forced toward the inevitable. The doubles grinned wider, stepping closer, mirroring the panic in every movement. Their hollow eyes reflected the terror perfectly, each flicker of light revealing the impossible stretch of their jaws, the coldness of their smiles. The forest twisted, bending paths, twisting trees, forcing the travelers forward, until the clearing was all that existed in their world. And the well waited at its center, black and endless, exhaling its cold mist in anticipation. Exhausted, bleeding, terrified, the last travelers stumbled toward the well. Mud clung to their bodies, roots entangled their feet, rain lashed their faces, and the forest pressed in from every direction. The well yawned like a mouth, black and infinite. Shadows flickered inside its depths, impossible shapes reaching upward, grasping for the living. The doubles flanked them at the edge of the clearing, silent and patient, their grins stretching impossibly, hollow eyes locked on the travelers' faces. The skeletons shuffled forward, joints creaking, teeth clattering. They circled the well, forming a wall, a trap with no escape. Above, the house watched, its windows glowing with unnatural light, shadows writhing inside like smoke made solid. And from the depths of the well came that breathing once more, slow, patient, unyielding, a reminder that the forest, the house, the well, the laughter, they were eternal. The traveler's final scream was swallowed by mud, mist, and darkness. When the last scream vanished, silence fell over the clearing. Rain still drummed against leaves, but it was muted, distant, as if filtered through layers of stone and earth. The forest leaned inward, every tree poised like a sentinel, branches resting after the storm. The well exhaled a faint mist, curling outward, then settling into stillness. Its depths reflected only darkness, yet shadows flickered, tiny shapes that shifted but never rose. The doubles stood at the tree-lean, motionless, their grins frozen, waiting. The skeletons crouched nearby, silent now, as though they had returned to slumber. The house loomed at the clearing's edge, windows unlit, quiet. Dust settled over broken boards and cracked glass. No lanterns flickered, yet the building seemed alive, breathing slowly, watching patiently for the next. And the forest itself whispered faintly, a soft, curling sound, half wind, half laughter. It was patient, eternal, waiting. Time passed differently here. Days, nights, storms, none mattered. Travelers entering the forest often swore they saw glimpses of figures moving between trees, pale, grinning shadows that darted just out of reach. Mirrors and puddles reflected impossible forms, showing faces twisted in eternal grins, bodies suspended between the living and the dead. The road remained, winding in impossible loops. Travelers who had seen its curves once often ended up back at the clearing, where the house and the well waited unchanged. Even those who believed they had fled found themselves wandering paths that no map could record, chased by shadows that mimicked every movement, every gesture, every heartbeat. The well exhaled mist from below. Its call was soft now, but insistent. It remembered every name, every fear, every scream. And the laughter, layered and endless, echoed through the forest, waiting to swell again. The house at the edge of the clearing had no doors for the living, no windows for escape. Yet its presence was undeniable. Lanterns occasionally flickered in windows, shadows writhing inside, though no one could explain their source. The walls whispered in languages that were somehow familiar, repeating travelers' fears, thoughts, and names back to them. Those who approached the clearing too closely felt an invisible weight pressing on their shoulders, dragging at their feet, bending the paths they walked. The well exhaled mist, curling around ankles, tugging travelers slowly toward the black depths. The doubles waited at the tree-lean, grinning, silent, unblinking, while skeletons crouched like predators, waiting to reassemble at the first sign of hesitation. And the forest itself leaned inward, listening, remembering. Every shadow, every whisper, every heartbeat became part of the endless memory of hollow pines, ready to claim the next soul who dared tread its path. At night, travelers near hollow pines sometimes heard faint whispers carried on the wind. Names were called softly, almost kindly, but there was a sharp edge beneath each syllable. The forest seemed to speak, coaxing anyone near the edges of the clearing to step closer, to obey the pull of the house, the well, the shadows. Those who paused too long often glimpsed something moving just beyond the trees. Pale figures, twisted mouths, hollow eyes. The wind carried their own laughter back at them, distorted and slow, echoing like the memories of screams long past. The forest was patient. It would wait years, decades, until the next traveler stumbled too close. From below, the well exhaled its mist, curling slowly over the roots and stones. The air thickened, chilling and damp. Travelers sometimes reported a tug at their ankles, a subtle pull that made it almost impossible to walk away. The doubles lingered silently, grinning wider with every hesitant step, waiting for the moment fear turned into surrender. The forest itself seemed alive, breathing in tandem with the clearing. Trees leaned inward, branches stretching, roots shifting subtly to block paths. Moss and leaves moved without wind, rustling in eerie synchronicity. Travelers often felt eyes upon them even when alone. The shadows were patient, always just at the periphery of vision, vanishing when looked at directly. Rain collected in pockets of mud and rock, forming shallow pools that reflected impossible shapes. Faces, twisted grins, eyes hollow and unblinking. The well's mist seeped from the black depths into the forest floor, curling toward anything that moved, slowly, irresistibly, like the pull of water into a drain. The house remained at the edge of the clearing, silent yet alive. Windows flickered faintly, shadows moving inside, stretching toward the forest, anticipating the next arrival. Each night, the chorus of laughter began softly, then swelled into a deafening hum that echoed through every branch, every root, every shadow, waiting for someone to answer. The laughter of hollow pines never truly faded. It was layered, eternal, a chorus composed of voices from countless travelers who had vanished before. Those who heard it at night could not resist its pull, their steps instinctively guiding them toward the clearing, toward the house, toward the well. The doubles mirrored movements with perfect precision, pale faces and impossible grins reflecting the fear of the living. Skeletons shuffled silently, reforming as needed, their teeth clattering, waiting for hesitation. And beneath it all, the well breathed, exhaling mist that wrapped around ankles and hands, dragging anyone who faltered closer to the black depths. The storm could pass, the wind could die, and the sun could rise, yet the forest, the house, the well, the laughter, they remained. Hollow Pines was patient, eternal, waiting for the next soul to stumble, to answer, to vanish. Even in the quietest moments, the forest of hollow pines seemed to move. Shadows shifted subtly along the trunks of trees, mimicking every small motion, stretching and curling with impossible angles. Travelers who approached the clearing at night often felt unseen hands brushing their shoulders or tugging at their boots, only to find nothing there when they turned. The house's windows glimmered faintly, as though lanterns burned within, though no one could enter. From the well, a thin mist slithered across the ground, curling over roots and rocks, cold and wet. It whispered their names softly, inviting, coaxing, reminding them that the forest remembered. The doubles lingered at the edge of the clearing, grinning, hollow-eyed, patient. Skeletons crouched low, joints creaking, watching the slightest hesitation, ready to strike when fear overcame resistance. And the wind carried the softest of laughter, a melody stitched together from voices long gone. Travelers who thought they had escaped often found the path bending back, looping impossibly. Roads disappeared, replaced by mud and roots. Trees twisted to block passage, leaning inward as if guiding every step back to the clearing, back to the house, back to the well. The forest pressed in like a living thing, breathing and shifting. Shadows flitted at the corners of vision, figures crouching low, smiling, disappearing when approached. Mirrors and puddles reflected impossible forms, faces with hollow eyes and mouths stretched into eternal grins. The doubles mirrored every movement, ever patient, while the skeletons shuffled silently, ready to reform around the next faltering traveler. Above it all, the house's windows glimmered, lanterns flickering like hearts, waiting for the next scream to echo into the night. The well, black and endless, exhaled mist into the clearing, curling over travelers' feet and hands. Its depths seemed to breathe, inhaling, exhaling, tugging. Whispered promises of warmth, safety, and release carried in the fog, but every word was a lie. The doubles circled, hollow eyes fixed, grins stretching impossibly wide. Skeletons crouched near the rim of the clearing, watching, listening. The forest leaned inward, pressing travelers toward the inevitable. Those who paused too long felt the pull stronger, a tug they could not resist. The laughter rose, first softly, then as a deafening chorus, echoing from the trees, the mud, the house, and the well. And in that moment, the realization struck. Resistance was impossible. The forest would have them. The house would have them. The well would have them. And so it had for countless others before. The last travelers stumbled forward, feet sinking into the mud as the forest's pull grew stronger. Roots twisted around their ankles like serpents, tugging, binding, dragging them toward the clearing. Rain stung their faces, but even that offered no relief. Every breath carried the chill of the well's mist, thick and suffocating, curling upward to meet their lungs. The doubles advanced silently, grins stretching impossibly, hollow eyes fixed on their prey. Skeletons shuffled behind them, joints clicking, their motions jerky but precise. Shadows slithered along the forest floor, darting between roots, stretching over rocks, reaching for the travelers with cold persistence. The house loomed above, windows glowing faintly, shadows writhing inside. Its presence pressed down like a weight, unyielding, patient. The forest, the well, the house, they were not separate. They were one, breathing, watching, waiting. And the laughter rose again, layered, endless, echoing from every corner of the clearing. One traveler tripped in the mud, face striking the cold, wet earth. They struggled to rise, but the roots and muck wrapped around their legs, holding tight. From the shadows, a double approached, grinning, hollow eyes reflecting the terror in their face. Skeleton hands emerged from the mud, grasping, pulling, dragging. Screams echoed through the forest, swallowed by rain and darkness. The well exhaled, mist curling higher, wrapping around the falling traveler, pulling them closer to its black depths. The others tried to help, but the forest bent paths impossibly, blocking their approach, twisting the clearing into a trap. The house flared faintly in the distance, shadows moving with intent. The laughter rose, deafening, a chorus of every voice claimed by hollow pines, and the traveler disappeared beneath the mud, leaving nothing but echoing screams and a final, wet laugh. The remaining travelers ran blindly, slipping through mud, roots, and darkness. Every path bent back toward the clearing. Every turn led them closer to the house, to the well, to the doubles and skeletons waiting silently. The storm raged above, but the forest itself was alive, twisting, breathing, pressing them onward. The well exhaled its mist, curling over ankles and hands, tugging, pulling. The doubles mirrored every movement, grinning wider, eyes hollow, patient. Skeletons crouched low, joints creaking, waiting for hesitation. Shadows stretched across every surface, writhing, watching. And the laughter rose, a deafening crescendo, echoing from the house, the trees, the well, the mud, until the travelers realized it. There was no escape. The forest, the house, the well, they had already won. Resistance was meaningless. Hollow pines claimed them as it had claimed countless others. The remaining travelers felt the pull of the well stronger than ever. Mud rose around their feet like living hands, dragging, gripping, refusing release. Each step toward the edge of the clearing brought them closer to inevitability. The mist curled around their ankles, climbing higher, icy and thick, tasting of rot and ancient earth. The doubles closed in silently, grins impossibly wide, Hollow eyes locked on their prey. Skeletons shuffled forward, forming walls of bones, crouching low and waiting for the slightest falter. The forest pressed inward, trees twisting, branches scraping, roots tugging at every footfall. Above, the house's windows glimmered faintly, lanterns flickering in rhythm with the breathing of the well. The laughter rose, layered and endless, echoing from every corner, every shadow, every puddle. It was patient, eternal, and no one could resist it. One traveler tried to fight, clawing at the mud, ripping at roots, screaming into the storm. The forest responded, pulling harder, bending the clearing's paths, closing in. The doubles mirrored their frantic movements, silent and relentless, hollow eyes reflecting pure anticipation. Skeletons lunged suddenly, grabbing at limbs, their jaws clattering in silent mockery. The mist from the well rose higher, cold and suffocating, curling around the throat, around hands, around hearts. The storm's rain mixed with the mud, turning it into a viscous trap that swallowed any strength. The house flared brighter in the distance, shadows writhing inside, stretching toward the clearing. The laughter rose to a deafening crescendo, a chorus of voices that had long been claimed by hollow pines. Resistance faltered, fear became instinct, and inevitability crept closer. One by one, the travelers sank into the mud, hands dragged down by unseen forces. Screams echoed, cut off by the cold grip of the well's mist. The doubles and skeletons surrounded them, grins wide, eyes hollow, patiently waiting for every movement to cease. The forest twisted tighter, pressing inward, bending reality so that the path led only toward the clearing, toward the house, toward the well. Rain continued to fall, but it carried no relief, only the cold reminder of what was coming. The house loomed above the clearing, shadows writhing in windows, lanterns flickering. The well exhaled softly, curling its mist over the fallen, tugging at them, pulling them into darkness. The laughter rose, layered, endless, echoing through every root, every branch, every shadow, until the travelers disappeared entirely. Hollow pines claimed them, and the clearing fell silent, quiet, patient, waiting. After the last travelers vanished, the clearing returned to an eerie calm. Rain continued to fall softly, but no sound of struggle or scream remained. The mud and roots lay still, as though nothing had moved, yet the forest itself seemed to breathe slowly, patiently, waiting for the next arrival. The house stood at the edge of the clearing, crooked and silent, its windows unlit. Shadows rested inside, motionless, yet somehow aware. The well exhaled faint mist, curling lazily over its edges, as if testing the air for signs of life. The doubles and skeletons had retreated to the tree line, grinning in silence, waiting. Even the wind seemed cautious, carrying only soft whispers that sounded like names from long ago. Hollow pines had claimed its due, but it would not rest. The forest, the house, and the well remembered every soul, and they waited for the next. Time passed in hollow pines without rhythm. Days, nights, storms, they seemed meaningless. Travelers passing the outskirts sometimes glimpsed shadows moving between the trees, figures pale and grinning, vanishing when approached. The road bent in impossible loops, paths appearing and disappearing as if alive. The forest leaned inward, listening, remembering. Branches stretched toward the road, roots shifted beneath the earth, and leaves rustled softly, carrying whispers of those who had been claimed. Mirrors in puddles reflected impossible forms, half human, half shadow, grinning eternally. The well lay at the center of the clearing, black and endless. Its mist curled outward, calling softly to anyone near, tugging at ankles, whispering promises of safety and warmth, while the laughter rose, soft, patient, eternal. From the depths of the well came faint, wet breaths, exhaling in rhythm with the forest itself. Shadows shifted, doubling and stretching, forming impossible shapes along the ground. The house's windows glowed faintly, lanterns flickering as though breathing with anticipation. Travelers who dared approach were always drawn toward the clearing, toward the well, toward the house. Doubles and skeletons awaited, patient and silent, their hollow eyes reflecting the fear of the living. And the laughter rose again, soft at first, then swelling into a deafening chorus, echoing from trees, mud, shadows, and stone. The forest waited, the house waited, the well waited, and those who answered the whispers of hollow pines were never seen again. Hollow pines remained, untouched by time, storm, or sun. The clearing lay quiet, mud settling, roots curling back into the earth. The house stood at the edge, crooked, silent, yet alive with unspoken purpose. Its windows glimmered faintly, shadows shifting within, eternally patient. The well yawned black and endless, mist curling over its edges, carrying faint whispers, names, calls, laughter, promises of safety and warmth, tinged with inevitability, floated through the forest, twisting into the branches, sinking into the roots, carried on every breath of wind. Doubles and skeletons remained at the tree-lean, grinning, hollow-eyed, waiting. The forest leaned inward, every shadow stretching toward the road, every root listening for footsteps. Hollow pines remembered, hollow pines waited, and one day, someone would answer the call, stepping unknowingly into the path that led always back to the clearing, the house, the well, the laughter. The forest exhaled softly, patient, eternal, and it would never stop waiting.